Welcome back to the program. I'm joined now by KATV's senior political reporter, Marine Glisovic. Always good to be with her. Marine, thanks for being with us.
Always a pleasure, Roby.
The special session saw tax cuts. We saw economic incentives for a $3 billion steel mill project up in Northeast Arkansas. We also saw some legislation passed to kind of clean up some things. But there's kind of this whole time we were wondering why was this special session needed, knowing that there could be other things that could come up? Why do you think the special session was called as quickly as it was and as short and sweet as it was?
Well, I think that part of it, you have the tax cut that's going to start in 2022. People are going to start seeing some savings going from 5.9 to 5.5%. So I think that it would probably be easier to do that, right, as they're trying to implement different years and increments, eventually get to 4.9%. I think that another part of this is that you've got this steel project. We're one of 3 states that are competing for the steel project. I think that it would make sense that they would try to gather some type of incentives to bring this company to the state of Arkansas to quickly get that done, because as the governor had mentioned that they're in the driver's seat at this point. Well, I would imagine that this kind of pushed them to the driver's seat.
Yeah. Democrats were largely opposed to these tax cuts that did go into effect. There were some other advocacy groups that also said that this was not the best use of spending $500 million of surplus money. We heard from people advocating for more pre-K. We heard for people advocating for some more money for foster care, the developmentally disabled, lower income tax cuts of a greater proportion. Did you sense from watching some of the testimony that was out there that there may be some attention given to some of those other issues when the fiscal session convenes next February?
I do believe so. And I think that a lot of people are starting to pay attention to these DD waivers, what they're calling the wait list, developmental disabilities. I think that they mentioned some 3,000 or so on the list, waiting for services. Some people testified it's been maybe 6, 8, 10 years that people have been waiting for certain services. So I think that when it comes to those specific programs, there's going to be a lot of attention for that. The people supporting all this made sure to mention that this wasn't going to be cutting any services. They're not taking money away from any of the services the state provides. However, those opposing this argued that a lot of these services need to be further funded. You've got pre-K that it's been years since the last time that they added more funds to the pre-K program. So childcare was brought up, how expensive it is for somebody to pay for childcare and work. You're almost working just to pay for the childcare, and it kind of makes no sense. One of the driving factors too for the opponents I noticed was that they focused on this $60 non-refundable tax credit for folks making $23,600 or less. And what was interesting is when you break that down, by the amount of days per year, that's 16 cents a day, and that's what they kept driving. But the governor defended that when in his press conference, when he was asked about that 16 cents a day, he defended the fact that that's still a tax cut regardless. So
yeah, and there have been some lower income tax cuts in previous sessions too. The governor made note of that, and there will be some benefit to the refining of the tax brackets. All of that's in there. I think that there was some selective choice of using some of those arguments. Lastly, there were some outside of the scope of the call of the special session. There were some issues that some legislators wanted to bring up: a Texas-style abortion law, critical race theory obstruction, some other things like that. At the end of the day, they got out of there in 3 days. Why do you think that there was no appetite for extending this special session beyond the call of the governor's special session?
Well, I think that a lot of people obviously wanted to be home for the holidays, but all jokes aside, the Senate president and the Speaker of the House both mentioned when they were asked, why. Obviously, colleagues spoke up and they didn't want to stay there. I think that they're waiting to see what happens as, this abortion law continues to work its way through the courts. There are legal challenges that are happening. They kept touting the fact that we're already the, #1 pro-life state in the country. And so they felt that they had enough measures in place right now, and they want to see what happens in the courts. Why waste time doing something when we can end up having to change it later anyways, is kind of what their driving point was.
All right, KATV senior political reporter Marine Glisovic, always good to have you with us. Thanks for your coverage this week, and I appreciate your insight.
Thanks, Roby. Always a pleasure.
We'll be back with more right after this.